Could you cover a random $3,800 problem this week without moving money around like you're hiding evidence? Because that's the weird part of being a modern adult. You can have a decent job, a decent house, a decent life, and still get that stomach drop when the dentist texts treatment plan attached. It's not the big stuff that exposes it. It's the Tuesday stuff. The car needs brakes, not sometime soon like metal on metal today. Then the school email hits, field trip 185, dollars due Friday. Your property tax reminder is sitting unopened because you already know it's going to be a forge to jump. And your credit card app sends that cheerful notification, minimum payment due in 3 days. So you do the thing. You slide money from savings to checking. You delay the Roth contribution just this month. And you tell yourself you'll fix it after the next bonus, after the next raise, after the next normal month that never comes. And here's the part that should bother you. None of that is luxury. That's maintenance. That's the cost of keeping your life from breaking. A lot of 40-year-olds aren't broke. They're trapped. Different feeling. Broke is I don't have money. Trapped is I make money and it still doesn't create breathing room. There's a specific mechanism behind that. And it's not just spending too much on lattes. If anything, you're probably spending too much on solving problems fast because you're busy. In this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 forces that quietly trap people in their 40s, people with careers, families, and normal lives. The first one is the bill stack you can't negotiate. Housing, insurance, childcare, debt, and healthcare, all rising at the same time. The second is what I call the convenience tax, the hidden premium you pay when your schedule is packed and your energy is low. And the third one is the trap. It's the one that makes even smart, disciplined people feel like they're sprinting on a treadmill because it doesn't show up as a bill. It shows up as a temporary decision you keep repeating. Keep that in mind. I'm Ben. I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of money, specifically why people who look successful on paper still feel one bad month away from panic. So let's start with the most obvious force, because it's the one you can actually see. The fixed cost life that quietly eats your raises before you ever get to feel them. If you've ever caught yourself doing the due date shuffle between apps, mortgage on the 1st, car insurance on the 6th, utilities whenever they feel like it, then you already know the trap doesn't start with spending. It starts with timing. Because the hits don't come as one big disaster. They come as a cluster. Your kid needs a new retainer because the dog found the old one. That's $620. 2 days later, your HOA sends a special assessment email with a PDF you don't even want to open. And then your boss casually says, hey, we're changing health plans next quarter, which is corporate speak for your deductible is about to get taller. Or it's the quiet stuff that feels small until it stacks. Your phone storage fills up, so you upgrade the plan. Your streaming bundle expires and jumps by $18. The gym membership you swore you'd cancel keeps hitting because canceling requires a phone call during business hours, which is adorable. None of it is catastrophic. It's just constant. Then there's the one that really messes with your head. You look at your paycheck and it's the biggest number you've ever earned. And you still hesitate at a $49 oil change upsell like it's a moral test. That disconnect is the tell. Sound familiar? Here's the reality. At 40, the problem usually isn't that you're irresponsible. It's that your life has more mandatory subscriptions than your income has flexibility. And the first insight is brutal in a simple way. Raises don't feel like raises when they land in a bucket with holes. A $400 a month raise sounds real until your auto insurance renews up $70, your property taxes adjust up $110, and your grocery bill quietly runs $150 higher than it used to. That's the raise. Gone. Not on fun, on keeping the same life. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, subscribe. Now zoom out for a second, because this is where the mechanism shows itself. Your fixed costs don't just take money, they take options. When your baseline is high, every surprise becomes a financing decision. Not because you love debt, because you need the problem to go away by Friday. So the $1,900 HVAC repair goes on a card just for the points, then turns into 3 months of minimum payments, then turns into you pausing investing again because the card balance is temporary. That word is doing a lot of work. That's the first force starting to do damage, the fixed cost life. Not flashy, not dramatic, just heavy enough that you can't build speed. That's the setup. Because the second force isn't about bills at all. It's about what you pay when you're tired. There's also something almost insulting that happens when your life gets expensive. You stop buying time and start buying relief. You don't notice it in one big bad decision. You notice it in tiny clicks. The $14.99 same-day delivery because you forgot the science fair poster board. The $32 fees on a concert ticket you barely even want, but you already said yes. The $9.50 app upgrade because it's easier than calling customer support. None of these feel like spending. They feel like removing obstacles from your path. Then a normal Thursday hits. You're out of laundry detergent, the kids have practice, and you realize you promised to bring snacks. So you swing into the closest place and pay $27 for 2 boxes of granola bars and a bag of grapes that somehow cost the same as a small appliance. You could have done it for $13 at the big store, if you had an extra 35 minutes and a working brain. You didn't, so you pay the tired price. That's the mechanism. When your schedule is packed, money becomes the substitute for planning, energy, and margin. And the scary part, it doesn't show up as a shopping problem. It shows up as a life design problem. Because once you're in this mode, you don't just spend more, you spend differently. You pick the option with the fewest steps, the fewest phone calls, the fewest follow-ups. You keep the older phone because switching carriers is a hassle, even though it would save you $45 a month. That's $540 a year, not because you can't do the math, because you can't do the task. Same with subscriptions. You keep 3 free trials that aren't free anymore because canceling requires a password you don't remember and an email you don't check. So it's $12 here, $19 there, $24 there. Call it $55 a month. That's $660 a year for the privilege of not dealing with it. And then it graduates from small leaks to big ones. You ignore the car's weird noise for 2 weeks because you can't fit a shop visit into your day. Then it turns into a $1,250 repair instead of a $180 fix. The money didn't buy you a better life. It bought you permission to postpone. I call this the convenience tax, not treat yourself money, keep the machine running money. And it's brutal because it's invisible. You can't point to one villain. It's 100 little payments made by a version of you who's trying to survive the week. Here's what that does psychologically. It trains you to solve everything with speed. So when a real problem hits, medical bill, home repair, travel for a funeral, you don't look for the best option. You look for the fastest one. And fastest is usually financed. Keep that pattern in mind because it's the bridge between I'm doing fine and why do I always feel behind? That's the second force warming up. Here's a number that messes with people. It's not the $1,250 repair that traps you. It's the small premium you pay to keep your week from collapsing. Take one normal category, food that isn't groceries, not restaurants for fun. The we're out of everything and I can't do a full shop food. If you grab 2 emergency meals a week, one drive-through run that's $28 for the family, and one convenience store dinner that's $22, you just bought $50 of relief. That's $200 a month. That's $2,400 a year. Let that land. And $2,400 isn't a vibe. It's 6 months of a $400 car payment. It's a real chunk of an emergency fund. It's, I can pay cash for the next surprise money. But it never feels like that because it arrives in paper bags. Now stack the avoidance fees, the stuff you pay because dealing with the system is a part-time job. You miss a medical bill because it went to the old address and it's a $35 late fee. You forget to return the cable equipment, that's $120. You don't have time to shop around on home insurance and you overpay by, say, $38 a month. That's another $456 a year. So we're not talking about one bad habit. We're talking about a pattern that quietly burns something like $250 a month without ever looking like a crisis. That's $3,000 a year. Over 10 years, that's $30,000. And that's before the expensive part, because once you don't have that $250 of margin, the next problem gets financed. You put $1,700 on a card at 24% because the plumber doesn't take payment plans, and you need water tonight. The interest alone is roughly $34 a month at first. That's a subscription you pay for the fact that your life has no slack. Sound familiar? Here's the practical difference this creates between two 40-year-olds with the same income. Person A has $300 of monthly margin on purpose, so when the tire blows and it's $410, it's annoying, but it's not a strategy meeting. It's paid. Life continues. Person B gets by with $0 margin and a bunch of speed-based spending. Same tire blows, same $410, and now it's card balance, minimum payments, moving money, pausing investing, promising yourself it's temporary. That's not a money problem, that's a margin problem. And this is why the third force is so lethal. It takes that word temporary and turns it into a lifestyle. That's the bridge we're walking onto next. The shift happens faster than you'd expect. The moment you stop calling it temporary, you start seeing your whole financial life like a control panel instead of a crime scene. Because that third force, the one I warned you about, isn't a bill. It's the repeating decision, I'll float it. I'll catch up next month. I'll put it on the card and clean it up later. And at 40, later quietly turns into your default operating system. Here's what changes when you finally label it. First, the next surprise stops becoming a meeting. Your kid cracks a phone screen at school and the repair quote is $289. Old you would have done the little dance. Check the checking account, move money, leave the card balance to deal with, feel gross for 3 days. New you has a boring category for it. You pay it, the story ends there. Let that land. Second, you stop paying the panic premium. The dentist sends the estimate, $1,140, due at the appointment. The trapped version of you asks, which card has room? The untrapped version asks, do I want the cash discount or do I want the points? Same bill. Completely different life. Third, your calendar gets cheaper. When you have margin, you don't need to buy your way out of every inconvenience. You can actually take 20 minutes on a Wednesday to call the insurance company, switch plans, and save $52 a month. That's $624 a year. That's not optimization, that's buying back future oxygen. Fourth, the big stuff stops being a cliff. The water heater goes out and the quote is $1,980. With no margin, that becomes a 24% APR souvenir you carry for a year. With margin, it's still annoying, but it's not a new monthly payment that blocks everything else. That's the difference. Problems stay problems. They don't become subscriptions. And here's the psychological part nobody expects. You get your brain back. When you're trapped, you're constantly doing background math. You're mentally timing paychecks, scanning balances, doing that thing where you hesitate before opening an email because it might cost money. That's not adulting. That's low-grade financial threat detection. When you build even a small buffer like $400 to $600 of intentional margin, your decisions get calmer and cleaner. You stop needing speed. You stop needing perfect months. You stop negotiating with yourself. Now, you might be thinking, cool, Ben, margin sounds nice. Where exactly am I supposed to find it? Good, because the next part is where we make it real, without pretending you can just budget harder your way out of a system that's been chewing people up. So where do you find margin when your life already feels like a full-time job plus overtime? Because if your checking account ends most months at like $43, telling you to save more is basically comedy. The good news is you don't need a personality transplant. You need one small win that breaks the temporary loop. 1, not 12. That's the checkpoint. You've seen the 3 forces. Now we build the first layer of escape on purpose. Start with a rule that feels almost too simple. Create a buffer category that is allowed to exist. Not an emergency fund in a separate bank with a password you forgot. A working buffer in the same account you actually use. Call it Friday problems, because that's when everything hits. Your first target is not $10,000. It's $750. Enough to eat a tire, a copay, a school fee, or a plumber's show-up charge without turning your finances into a crime scene. Now the practical path. You don't go hunting for savings in the abstract. You audit the 2 places where 40-year-olds bleed cash: speed and autopilot. Speed is the stuff you buy because you're late, tired, or both. Autopilot is the stuff that charges you while you're living your life. So this week, you do 2 20-minute moves. Move 1. Open your last month of transactions and circle anything that's basically, I needed this handled today. Delivery fees, convenience groceries, the pharmacy you always overpay at because it's on the way. Pick one of those and cap it with a hard number. Not less, a number. Like, I get $120 this month for relief spending. When it's gone, it's gone. Move 2. Cancel or downgrade one autopilot charge. Just one. The cloud storage you upgraded in a panic, the subscription you didn't even know you still had, the premium version of an app you use twice a month. Find $25 to $60 and redirect it to Friday problems. Here's the math of achievable. If you free up $45 a month on autopilot and $35 a week on speed spending, that's about $185 a month. In 4 months, you're sitting on roughly $740. That's your thirst buffer. That's your nervous system unclenching. Then the progression gets easier because the buffer starts paying you back. The first time you pay a $312 urgent care bill without a card swipe, you don't just save interest, you save the next 3 months of mental noise. And that's when you can do the slightly bigger moves, calling insurance, shopping a refinance, negotiating a bill, because you're not solving fires all day. It's not effortless, it's just finally directional. Most trapped 40-year-olds don't lack discipline, they lack a runway. Build a short runway, and suddenly your income starts acting like income again. So there it is. Being financially trapped at 40 usually isn't about income, and it isn't about willpower. It's about living with a baseline so tight that normal life turns into financing decisions, and then calling that temporary for years. Those were the 3 forces. Here's the one shift that changes everything. You stop treating every surprise like a personal failure, and you start treating it like a line item you're allowed to have. Most people think the hardest part is finding more money. They're wrong. The hardest part is breaking the reflex to float it, because floating feels like solving, but it's just renting tomorrow. If you're sitting there right now with $0 margin and a bunch of little "I'll clean it up later" balances, don't panic. Start smaller than your pride wants to. Build the Friday problems buffer until a random $260 thing, like a prescription, a kid's activity fee, a tow, doesn't touch your credit card. And when you get your first win, lock it in. Don't use that breathing room to upgrade your life. Use it to upgrade your options. Because the goal isn't to never have problems. The goal is that problems don't become payments. That's how people get trapped, not with one huge mistake, but with 100 small emergencies that keep getting turned into subscriptions. And you don't escape with a dramatic overhaul. You escape with one boring buffer that makes temporary stop being your personality. Don't be the 40-year-old who can't afford a normal week. If this helped, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.